Well, this is a bit of a treat. I get to interview my partner in crime, my husband, Brett Jarman. And I think you all know that we have been meditating. Well, Michelle and I have been meditating for quite a while, but my husband and I, we've been meditating for over 30, is it 33 years?
33 years.
33 years. So I'd like to introduce you to Brett Jarman, meditation teacher, strategist. He helps us with all of our tech and our podcast production. So he's got a lot of strings to his bow. And I just thought it would be absolutely appropriate that we talk to him about something that is very dear to my heart, but also something that he has studied for quite an extensive period on Vedic meditation. So welcome, Brett Jarman.
Thank you, Jan. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Often when I talk about stress and meditation, it is one of the best things that I have ever done in my life for my mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being. And today I'd like to just kind of extrapolate what those key benefits are. And also, this thing about stress and, the benefits of, meditation with stress. So can you tell us a little bit about stress? Like, what is it? Because there's so many definitions.
Yeah. Well, there's actually a lot to talk about when it comes to stress, and particularly in the work context, because, the thing is, stress is very personal. What you find stressful and I find stressful is very different.
Oh, yeah.
and so in the workplace, leaders are often burdened with not knowing what people find stressful, and that in itself can cause stress for the leaders. So it's like playing whack-a-mole, where you often you don't actually know what you're dealing with in terms of workplace stress. And so, and the thing is, people now they come to the workplace pre-primed for stress. They're already stressed out by things that are going on in their life. So they might have relationship issues, financial issues, health issues. They're probably on their commute. They've been, on social media, and there's a lot of anxiety that can kind of arise from that. And so by the time they get to work, they're already pre-primed. And then when you throw in the burden of stress from work on top of that, then it can just cause, often work ends up getting the blame for someone being stressed, when really it's just like, it's really just the tip of the iceberg. I often use the example of road rage. When we see someone having road rage, it's never, because someone cut you off in traffic that caused it. It's all of the other things that happen in the lead up to that. And road rage, that getting cut off in traffic is just the thing that tips someone off the edge. And so often in the workplace, they're sort of burdened with that responsibility of, and let's face it, people are at work theoretically for 8 hours a day. And even if they're working remotely, they can still take on the stress of the workplace. And so really the responsibility for relieving stress is actually a joint responsibility, a shared responsibility between both the workplace and the people who are coming to the workplace. And that's the beauty of a meditation practice. And a lot of businesses are now using teachers like myself to come in and teach their workplace meditation. So, and they'll subsidize it usually. And so then the people who are working for them, they have, and it's not something you would force on someone. You would only have people participate in it voluntarily. But if the workplace contributes to it, and then the people, they're responsible for actually doing the practice once they get home, then they get the benefits from that.
Yeah, it's like leaders have an extra burden, isn't it?
Yeah, well, absolutely. And the extra burden for the leaders is, because the thing with stress is it's contagious.
Yeah.
Like it's the real pandemic that we've got right now. It's contagious. And as I said earlier, even if someone's working remotely, that contagion can spread. But it's more contagious from the head down. So so if the leader is stressed, then that stress is going to percolate down to other workers in the workplace. If a leader turns up and they're stressed from whatever their situation might be, people pick up on that. And so there's an extra burden of responsibility on the leader to manage their own stress first, and to take responsibility for the impact that they're having on their staff, and also to help their staff sort of manage their stress and relieve that through various means.
So if I'm a leader, what are some of those signs of stress that I need to be mindful of?
Yeah, but before we go on to that, I do want to make the point that some stress is good. In fact,
yeah.
stress itself is essential. There's a term called eustress, eustress, and that's basically means good stress. And so, for example, when you go to the gym and you work out and you do some weights or whatever, you're putting stress on the body. And even though the body feels some pain at the time and might feel some pain over the next couple of days, it's actually good because it stretches the body, challenges the body to build more muscle. And the same in the workplace or even in life in general. We do want to have situations where we're challenging ourselves, where we're pushing ourselves, pushing our boundaries. Otherwise, the workplace just becomes stagnant. So we don't want to be getting rid of stress altogether, but we do want to keep an eye out for the bad stress. And so signs that there might be bad stress around. And this is where, one of the hallmarks of leadership is self-awareness, but it's also awareness of the people that you're working with. So, for example, just sit back and notice, how are people arriving at work each morning? Do they seem fresh and well rested, or are they coming in kind of, they're bringing their brain fog with them? And fresh and well rested doesn't mean that they're wired, because they've already had their 2 shots of coffee, and they're kind of wired from that. There is a distinction between the two. So that's one of the signs. How are they responding to challenges in the workplace? Do they come across as being overwhelmed when you give them something to do? Do they seem kind of baffled and unsure about what to do? That's a symptom of stress. How are they responding to their colleagues? Like if someone says something, are they taking offense unreasonably towards that? That can be a sign of stress. We can say something so innocently, and especially with email and all the communication platforms, it's just so easy to be misunderstood. And if the recipient of the communication is stressed, then that can kind of be blown out of proportion. So that's another sign. How are they responding to you and the request that you're making of them? Do you notice when you walk into the room, do people change their sort of posture? Do they appear to be on edge or whatever? That's a sign of stress, and that's what I mean about the contagion of stress. Those kinds of things. Are they coming to you to solve all their problems? So one of the things that we talk about is there are no problems, there is only problem consciousness. And we all know this from experience, because we've had situations where there's a problem that we just can't solve, and then we show it to someone else, and they say, oh yeah, just do this and this and this. You go, oh, what? Do a facepalm moment. How did I not see that?
Yeah.
And it's not because we didn't know what the solution was. It's because when we're stressed, the blinkers go on, and we just we can't see the solution. It's just over there, but we can't see it. But then someone else comes in, and their blinkers aren't so focused, and so they're able to solve the problem, which was never really a problem in the first place. It was just our inability to perceive the solution. And then the other sign of stress is, are the people that you're working with in the right role? And I'll give you an example. I've got a client that I've been working with, and I sat in on an interview with a new staff member. It would have been about 12 months ago, and he seemed perfect for this particular role, culture-wise, values-wise. Like this person was obviously going to be an absolute gem and was going to perform really well in that role. But then once he got in that role, the performance wasn't quite as expected, and it just kind of didn't match the expectations that both my client and myself had of this person. But then once we changed that role, once my client changed the role that person was in, suddenly he came to life, and like he was really in the right place. It was still, but both roles were customer facing, and we'd identified that they were perfect for a customer facing role. But the first one that they were in, it was a little bit too ambiguous. But once we put them in a role where it was clear what the processes and procedures were, and how to do it, and all those kinds of things, like he's been thriving ever since.
Yeah.
So often when employers, and this is where your expertise comes in, going in and working with organizations, profiling them, profiling the staff, and just kind of through those kinds of self-awareness and group awareness procedures, that in itself reduces stress in an organization. So those are some kind of warning signs, I guess, of stress in a workplace.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, there was one other, which is quite profound and does cost businesses a lot, and that is people taking a lot of sick leave.
Yeah.
And the proverbial mental health day, even though they may not declare it a mental health day, that there's so much more common now to what it was, when we were first sort of entered the workforce. So, yeah, excessive sick leave is a real sign of stress, and it's a huge cost to business as well.
Yeah. And also just the quality of work that you can do, like when you are stressed, when you mentioned that your blinkers are on and, like when you are solving a problem, this is when you need that expanded perspective of things. And I think to have a tool that allows you to manage that just impacts all areas of your life. And for us, like over the years, now when we look at key executives, there's very few, especially CEOs and managing directors, who do not practice meditation.
Absolutely.
Because they know that this is the kind of like the golden key, the golden ticket for them.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously the burden of stress is kind of greater on them, but it's all relative. And so if meditation is good enough for the senior leaders, then it's 100% good enough for everyone in the workforce.
Yeah.
I mentioned already, people are coming pre-primed for work. So through meditation, you're not just reducing the workplace stress or the impacts of workplace stress, you're also reducing the impacts of the non-workplace stress that they're having. So it's a huge benefit to everyone.
Yeah. And so, it's interesting. We create a lot of programs that building resilience and managing stress, and we give them some, interventions. And the most impactful that I know is actually learning to meditate, is whether or not organizations and companies can really garner enough information, because a lot of companies are quite risk averse about doing this thing called, like meditation. So what do you think, if you were to describe some of the benefits, because there's a lot of research now, because it's the risk reward balance, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, so I've already mentioned sick leave. Yeah. Like if you can reduce sick leave, just by 2 days for one person, that alone has a huge impact on the financial bottom line. I've already mentioned problem solving. If people are more empowered, like if their blinkers are sort of wider in their perspective, and this is one of the benefits of meditation, is you kind of broaden your consciousness, so to speak. So your ability to see solutions improves. That in turn leads to better decision making, more confident decision making. People spend less time having to sort of go out and research and get a second, third opinion, and even offload the responsibility for a decision onto someone else. And this is what people are doing whenever they come to the boss to solve a problem or to make a decision. It's because they don't have the confidence to take on that responsibility for themselves. So problem solving, creativity. Like in a lot of roles, creativity, and I don't just mean artistic creativity, but in terms of when you're doing, say, a strategic workshop or looking at a strategic level rather than and even at the tactical level, to be honest, creativity is required. Like when you look at a lot of the major problems that have been solved, or the major insights that have been solved, they've happened when the person who had that insight was at their sort of most relaxed state. So, for example, Newton, when he discovered gravity, he was just sitting there watching an apple fall, and that was when he had his aha moment. He didn't create gravity, or he didn't invent it, but he created the insights in order for us to understand gravity. With Einstein, he used to, one of his tools, he didn't have the meditation technique that we teach, but he used to use what they call the key method. And there's a lot of, and even I think Plato is said to have used the same thing. And with the key method, you sit, you close your eyes, you put your keys in your hand, and you have an upturned bowl on the ground next to you. And so you sit there, and what Einstein recognized was he had his greatest insights in that point between being awake and being asleep. So he didn't want to fall asleep, and the function of the keys was to make sure he didn't fall asleep while he was sitting there quietly. Because if he did fall asleep, his hands would relax totally, keys would drop, and then he would wake up, because that wasn't his goal. It wasn't to fall asleep. It was just to be in that state. So, and his creativity he was so creative that people could not understand what he was saying at that time. Some of his theories, like he was more of a theorist than a scientist. It took some scientists, 20, 30, 40, 50 years to prove what he was theorizing back then. So he had access to massive amounts of creativity. If you've got happy staff, you've got less conflict in the workplace, and the cost of conflict is huge. Bringing in mediators, lost productivity, the cost of having cliques within the workplace, all of that kind of stuff fades away if you've got people turning up, they're feeling refreshed, feeling creative, feeling more inspired by their work, simply because they've released stress from their physiology. So there's no end to the benefits.
It's interesting, like when you were saying a happy workforce. So one of our dear friends who is a senior executive, he learnt to meditate several years ago, and he said, Jan, I'm just happier, and just to actually see that in him, because he was always very, science focused and, looking at problems and that. And even, for him to have that experience and to share that was just brilliant. And I just know, even in my own life now, like I travel a lot, and, every now and then a flight is going to be cancelled, and I just do not feel what I used to feel before. Like I don't get slight annoyance, but hardly anything. It's like I'm on to the next thing. Oh, okay, I can listen to a Netflix, or I'm going to listen to music or whatever. It's like, but shouldn't I feel frustrated? And I actually don't. It's just amazing, the benefits of it. And I think you just get used to feeling so good about it, that I just can't imagine not doing it now. Because a lot of people go, I can never sit down, for 20 minutes twice a day or whatever you need to do. And I say to them, because most people who know me, I'm that extroverted extrovert. If I can do it, it's like, anyone can sit down and do it.
Yeah. So two follow-up comments on that. The first is that thing about I'm just happier. What happens is, it's what we call baseline happiness. The more time you spend using the technique that we teach, we go to a place called transcendence, and basically you transcend thinking, and you get to the point where the mind is so content it can't think, it doesn't even have the need to think, because the function of thinking is always to make us feel happier. Even when we're worrying, having worried thoughts, the function of the mind is to try to relieve a problem or to solve a problem so that we can feel happier. But with the technique that we teach, we use what we call a mantra. It's a seed mantra, a very specific mantra for each person. And the mantra charms the mind down to the point where it has no need to think. And at that point, it's so content, it just doesn't have to think at all. And we call it bliss. It's not bliss as in ecstatic bliss, but bliss as in pure contentedness. And the more times you go down there, you actually start to bring that state up with you. Every time you go to meditate, you're bringing more and more of that into your life. And so your baseline happiness, you get to the point where you're not buffeted by all the circumstances going on around you, and you don't even need other things to be happy, because you just are. And that's why you can get to the point where flight gets cancelled. So, okay, well, that's interesting. I'm still happy. I'm still content because my physiology is able to process that stress so efficiently. So efficiently.
Yeah.
And what was the second point I was going to raise on that? There was the
happiness one.
Yeah, happiness and... No, I've lost it. It might come up again.
Okay. So a lot of times, people talk to me about, I've got an app, and I meditate, or actually I walk and that's my meditation. What are the different types of meditation?
There are thousands, tens of thousands. If you go on YouTube today and search meditation, you would find tens of thousands of guided meditations. And they all have a benefit. But the thing is, most forms of meditation, they have what we call an agenda, meaning there's a specific outcome. So the two main types, apart from the transcendent type that I've just described, are concentration and contemplation. So concentration might be, okay, I want you to focus on your breath, going in, out, or looking at a candle flame, which used to be my favorite type of meditation before I discovered, not that I discovered Vedic meditation, but before I learned Vedic meditation. And so that's one of the forms. And then the other is contemplation. And things like guided visualizations, that would fit in that space, because the mind is contemplating on something. And the benefits of those things, it brings the mind to a single point of focus, which is a good thing. We go from scattered brain thinking a million miles an hour what we call the monkey mind, where there's all these kinds of things going on. But when you come to a sort of a more focused state, and we feel that state, sometimes when we're watching television or going to the movies, where you get so absorbed in something that all of the other problems kind of drift away. So that's the main benefit of those types of things. When you're walking, you have a kind of a rhythmic pace, and you can kind of be mindful of what's around you. When you're swimming, looking at the black line, which is what some people do. They're meditative, and in fact the word meditation means think, to think, have thoughts. And so our style of meditation is actually it's a little bit contradictory, because one of the outcomes of this style of meditation is that you actually stop thinking. So it's meditation, but it's also non-meditation at the same time. So those other techniques, the apps, the guided meditations, or even a non-guided meditation, but something where you have a specific focus. It might be, okay, I'm going to focus on my chakras or whatever. There's an agenda with that. And an agenda always keeps the mind engaged. Whereas with a transcendent style of meditation, like Vedic meditation, there's no agenda. And we don't even have an expectation of our meditation. I might have a meditation where it's just 20 minutes of constant thinking.
Yeah.
It's still a good meditation because I sat down, closed my eyes with an intention. And that doesn't mean that sitting down and closing your eyes for 20 minutes is a good meditation. Is on its own is a meditation. You still need to be taught the process in order for that to have a benefit. And so if you think of the Pareto principle, which a lot of people in business would, the 80-20 rule. So 80% of your results come from 20% of your effort. So I'd never tell someone not to do mindfulness or not to do another meditation technique. But if you were to do a transcendent meditation technique like Vedic meditation, you get 80% of the results in terms of stress release would come from that. The other techniques, that may give you some benefit, but it would kind of pale in comparison to having a transcendent style, because that benefit of just going to the place of what we call the source of thought and raising your baseline happiness. And it has a physical effect on the body, because the mind and the body, they're so closely related. Your body chemistry changes. So the people who are turning up for work at the moment, they're full of adrenaline, cortisol, caffeine, stimulants. As I say, they're pre-wired for stress. But with a transcendent meditation technique, the chemistry changes. And so you now start to introduce serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, the love chemical. Those things start to flow through the body. And so your body chemistry literally changes. And then your body's able to undergo whatever healing it may need as a result of that. So, so there's so much to be said for it. But that's the main distinction between the different types of meditations.
Okay. So now that hopefully we've intrigued people to think about, what this Vedic meditation is, how can they access it? What do they need to do? How can they find out about it?
So it needs to be taught by a qualified teacher. So this is not something, you can't learn it online. There are teachers who do teach it online, but I wouldn't recommend that, because the experience, it's a felt experience, and you need to be there in the presence of the teacher. So one of my commitments when I was endorsed by my teacher is I won't teach it online. I always teach it face to face. And you learn it over a 4-day period. So it doesn't mean 4 full days. It's about an hour to an hour and a half each day over 4 days. On the first day, that's one-on-one with the teacher. And that is where you are given the sound, the mantra, and you are taught the actual technique. And then the 3 follow-up days, the first day is about the mechanics of the process, understanding, how to incorporate it into your life. And that's when we cover things like time. Oh, I don't have time. And, that was the other thing. Remember when I said there were 2 things? People say they don't have time to meditate, but meditation doesn't take time. If it's done right, it actually creates time, because your sleep might improve, and so you may need less sleep, because your decision making improves, your creativity improves. We start to do fewer of the dumb things and fewer of the habits that currently take time. If we're spending less time doing that, then the meditation time will just automatically create itself. So that's one of the things that we learn on day 2. On day 3, we talk about the mechanics of stress. I go into more depth about what I was speaking about, stress itself, and the mechanics of stress release, how meditation helps it release. And then on the 4th day, that's all about how to live your life outside of meditation, because at the end of the day, we don't learn to meditate just because we want that experience for those 20 minutes twice a day. We want it to improve our life. And so we talk about what some of the changes that you might expect, and then how to live with those changes. Because funnily enough, even though we know things are good for us, the status quo always takes precedent. It's our natural tendency to try to maintain the status quo. Even when we have our bad habits, we kind of stick to them because it's the known. And so we sort of help prepare people on that last day for that sort of known period. And then we've got ongoing support through group meditations and whatever. So that's how it's taught. In terms of workplaces, like if workplaces want to bring a teacher like myself in, and there are other teachers like me around the world who have sort of gone through the same level of study and have been endorsed by the same teacher.
Yeah, like you even went to India for 3 months.
Spent in India for 3 months, and that was after 2 years of very solid prep, which you're well familiar with. And so so we can come and teach it in a workplace, and the way we would do it first is we would come, do an information session, and see who is interested, and then if there is a pool of people interested, then we can work with an organisation. And I think I mentioned earlier, we generally recommend that an organisation and their staff co-pay for it. Rather than an organisation paying for all of it, we want the student themselves to have some skin in the game.
Yeah, for sure.
And by contributing to it, that gives them some skin in the game and ensures a commitment from them. And then you get some benefit from that. Some leaders, they may not want to do it just in the workplace. They may want to test it out themselves, in which case, they can reach out to me. And if I'm not able to teach them, because I'm not where they are, I can certainly connect them with a teacher who can.
So how can they reach out to you?
Yeah, so my website is themeditationpeople.com. I can be emailed via brett@themeditationpeople.com, or you can DM me in Instagram. And my handle there is Brett Jarman. So any of those methods you can find me.
Great. Okay. Beautiful.
All right.
So I suppose the other thing that I like to ask people is, what are they working on now? Like, what's exciting for you now?
Well, what's exciting for me now is I'm currently establishing a practice. So we live in Byron Bay, which some of your listeners would know. We're about 2 hours outside of Brisbane City. I'm working on building my meditation practice up there. I want to set up a studio there because that's where the demand is, or where the need is. We talk a lot in our circles about meeting the need of the time. And there's definitely a need. Like Brisbane's a great city. It's a fun city. But every time I go up there, I can see that there's a lot of stress. So that's where my focus is at the moment, is building a practice there. But it's not just limited to there. I can travel and do travel. I can teach anyone anywhere, really. But it's just a case of making the numbers viable. But that's my main game at the moment. Brisbane, the Gold Coast, and a little bit here in Byron Bay.
Yeah, and what a wonderful purpose is to raise consciousness, because often I say the world needs better leaders. And what a great way of enhancing your leadership capability through being able to meditate.
Yeah, 100%. And that's what's led me to doing this work. Like I've been working as a business consultant for 25 years now. And it was about probably 5 years ago where I had this kind of, I wouldn't call it an epiphany, but this realization that I wasn't giving people the real results that I could because I wasn't able to teach them meditation. So I know if I can teach someone meditation, then we're already halfway there in terms of getting the results and getting the success that they want in life. So
great. Yeah. Well, thank you, Mr. Brett Jarman.
Thank you for having me, Ms. Jan Turkelson.
My pleasure. Okay, thank you.
Bye for now.
If you found that video useful, then you'll be sure to find this one useful as well.